Good morning, West Coast. Good afternoon, East Coast. And we are live for week 4 of the Fantasy NFL Today live show with Fiddle and Sticks. Before we get started, I just want to say that I, as well as Fiddle and all of us on the Sports Ethos cast, I just want to say that we are praying for everybody through the devastation of Hurricane Ian. You know, I live down in Charleston, South Carolina, and we didn't get it too bad, thankfully. But Florida got it real bad. So I just want to let you guys know that we are praying for all of you guys. And it's unfortunate that through disaster and devastation, we start counting our blessings. So make sure you call your loved ones and be very appreciative for the little things that you have, like the roof over your head. Week 4 is a very interesting week. We have a lot of weather issues because of that lingering effect of Hurricane Ian. We're going to get into all that and in terms of wagering, as well as this is going to impact your fantasy football lineups, whether it's daily fantasy or your yearly round rosters because of the weather. Fiddle, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, my man. How are you? I know you're closer to the storm out there. I've seen your Twitter. I've seen your cute pictures of your daughter playing in the rain. It
Yes,
looks
sir.
like all fun and games. I obviously understand it's not, but yeah, I'm doing well. I'm more concerned about you guys on the East Coast.
I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, we missed it. So a few down trees here and there, but other than that, we were the lucky ones. So.
Do you want to start with that, JP? Should we start with which games are going to be impacted by the weather?
Absolutely.
Because that's going to impact a lot of the gambling discussion as well.
Absolutely. And I have here on my phone, I have the full weather update on the games that are going to be impacted. And this is very important. Please, if you're going to pay attention to anything today, make sure you're paying attention to this point right here. Okay. The games that are affected by the weather and what type of weather we are looking at is as follows. Okay. So the first game is Chicago Bears at the New York Giants. There is expected rain with heavier rain towards the second half of that football game. We're looking at 15-mile-an-hour winds with gusts upwards of 30 miles per hour. Run game, heavy. Chicago, New York. It was going to be heavy already, but now it's going to be even more heavy. The second game that's impacted, and this is remember this one. This is a big one. Buffalo at Baltimore. Okay, this is supposed to be a very high-scoring game, but we're going to see more rain in Baltimore, as well as 13-mile-an-hour winds and gusts upwards of 30 miles an hour. And then the last game that's impacted is the Jacksonville at Philadelphia Eagles game. We're going to see more rain there, as well as 15-mile-an-hour steady wind and 35-mile-an-hour gusts. Okay, so again, to recap that real quick, Chicago Bears at New York Giants, weather. Buffalo at Baltimore, weather. Jacksonville at Philadelphia, weather. So we'll get into the fantasy parts a little bit later. As always, we're going to start with the wagering, and our man Fiddle is that guy. Let's hear it, buddy.
Thanks for covering that, JP. I want to start out with two main points. I want to talk about first, because it is week 4, I addressed this on my podcast this week. I want to talk about what I consider the most important factor for handicapping any NFL game, specifically this season. Now, JP, let me ask you a question before I get started. Have you noticed that the matchups that we've been getting so far have been amazing? Have you noticed that the storylines coming out of this NFL season, the quarterbacks going up against each other, having week 1 be kickoff with Bills Rams, the Super Bowl projected team versus the Super Bowl winner. Week 2 was Mahomes versus Herbert. We had Brady versus Rodgers last week. This week we have Brady versus Mahomes again. Have you noticed that we've had some incredible matchups?
Yes, fairy tale writing by the NFL for sure.
Okay, this is intentional. There are 95 games this year where there is a rest advantage situation for one of the teams because the NFL is prioritizing matchups, because the TV package rights ends at the end of this season, and they can resell the game packages next season for tons and tons of money, just like what they did with Thursday on Prime. They are trying to recruit the streamers like Apple into the NFL fold. We know the DirecTV Sunday ticket ends this season, so they are prioritizing matchups, and for that reason, we have 95 games this season with a rest advantage or rest disadvantage situation, which is up from a 5-season previous high of only 64. So we went from 64 of these situations to 95 this year. That's nearly a 50% increase in these games. And starting week 4, because now we've gotten to the point where injuries are starting to pile up. We've now been 10 weeks out from when we started to arrive in training camp. So our bodies are starting to wear down. We've played the first few games of NFL football. Our guys who were not playing in preseason are now up to speed and have a few games under their belt. So now is when rest will start to matter more than anything else. And we always need to be cognizant of which teams are coming into games with a rest advantage or which teams are coming into the game with a rest disadvantage. And for this week, that means the two teams that played on the Thursday night game last week. So the week 3 Thursday was Browns versus Steelers. I like the Browns a lot this week. I like the Steelers too. There is some late money coming in on the Jets. However, I do like the Steelers. We know Zach Wilson's returning for his first game, and the Steelers are at home. That's a tough spot for the New York Jets. And then on the flip side of that, the rest disadvantaged teams are the teams that played on week 3 Monday night and are now on a short week. So those are the Cowboys and Giants. So the weather situation is probably going to be a no bet situation for me with the Giants game. The Cowboys Commanders game, we are seeing some push and some money come in on Dallas, but knowing the schedule situation, I'm not playing into it. Even though the Sharps are playing Dallas a bit, I will not find myself positioning with that game. The biggest schedule game, and I know I spoke about this last week, is this Browns-Falcons one. JP, last week I came on here and I said, my best bet is betting the Browns a week ahead and betting the Falcons this week. So now we've gotten to this week ahead where now the Browns are the bet and they play against the Falcons. The Falcons are coming off 2 weeks on the West Coast where they stayed out west. They return home to their families after 2 weeks. I'm sure you know this, being a family man. When you return to your family after 2 weeks, you're cooking dinner, you're doing dishes, you're putting your daughter to bed, and you're getting her ready for school. Right?
And getting yelled at by your wife, too. You got to add
exactly.
that.
You're taking some extra responsibilities, and that's simply pulling you away from doing the podcast or anything else that you had to do in your life. And that's the same thing for NFL football players. These guys have young families. They're similar in age to us. So that is the same situation they are going through. Meanwhile, so the Falcons have that, tough travel where they're returning home after 2 weeks on the road. The Browns are coming off this mini bye where they played and they have the rest advantage. So love the Browns this week. It's my biggest play at 1.5 units. It's not a max exposure play. There are some sharp money coming in on the Falcons. The Falcons have proven to be a better team than we expected this year. However, I feel the spot is very bad for the Falcons today. I love the spot for the Browns. And I'm going to be riding Browns -1 into today as one of my favorite bets. Some other bets that I really like. Bucks -1 against the Chiefs. I think Brady gets it done against Mahomes. We're seeing some late money come in on the Bucks. So I'd like to see that the Sharps are riding with me. I'm also on the 49ers tomorrow night, Monday night game. Shanahan has consistently dominated McVay. So we're going to ride that wheel. I think similar situation. Jimmy G just needs to get a few more reps under his belt, a few more practice time. I do think the 49ers are a team to start riding for the next few weeks as a team that will right the ship, get pressure on defense, and actually be a pretty stable offense that can have some explosive plays. So I'm on some favorites this week. I'm on Browns. I'm on Bucks. I'm on 49ers. And there's a few other spots that I hit, but we'll stick with those for now.
All right. Well, thanks, Fiddle. And before we get into the whole fantasy thing, the fantasy starts and sits, we're going to go through daily as well as year-long fantasy. Make sure you're getting those questions into the comment section. That way we can answer your questions. And if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast. It helps us out a ton, and we greatly appreciate it. I want to introduce a guest here. We have our guest, Steve, who is also part of the Sports Ethos family. I'm going to add him to the stream right now. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Watching this Sunday morning Vikings Saints a London game, which has been a lot of fun. Happy to be a part of this show.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for being here. And you said a lot of fun. I don't know. It's kind of pretty bad of a game, but I get what you're saying. I woke up nice and early on the East Coast because I'm up at 5 a.m. anyway with my 2 little kids, and there was football on a few hours later. So it's been exciting. But I do want to go ahead and touch a little bit on the fantasy aspect of that Browns game. Okay, because that is one of Fiddle's, best bets of the week is the Browns -1. In terms of fantasy, okay, the guy that I am really looking at here, if it's a daily or if you have a year-long league, is Amari Cooper. Okay, and the reason why I'm looking at Amari Cooper, in the first 3 weeks for fantasy purposes, he scored, and this is a full-point PPR, he scored 4 points, 25 points, and 23 points. And this week, he goes up against the Falcons, who've given up the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. Okay. We're looking at a guy, we're talking about a guy in Amari Cooper that's receiving 10 plus targets a week, about on average. I think Amari Cooper needs to be in your daily fantasy football lineups this week. And I'm not a daily fantasy guy, but Fiddle, in terms of cost relations and guys around him, is Amari Cooper somebody you think people should invest in this week in daily?
It's funny that you bring that up. Amari Cooper is actually probably one of the most frequent names played this week because of the weather situations on the East Coast, because that game is in a dome, because the total in that game has been sharped up. So I think it opened at 46.5. I think it's now closer to 48. So we are expecting some scoring in that game. Amari Cooper, I think, is $6,300 on the DraftKings tag. He's sitting around guys like Tyler Lockett and Brandon Cooks, and people are loving Amari. A lot of the optimizers are spitting out Amari. He is going to be what we call in the DFS space a bit of a chalk play, which means a lot of people are on him. I think it's a great point for you to point out, as he's someone who is delivering wide receiver 1 value, and he's not priced that way in the daily fantasy space.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there's some news. If you are into just taking one guy that's chalk, then Amari Cooper is your guy, and then kind of pepper some other guys around him that you don't think is going to be rostered that high. And I think that's a way that a lot of daily guys approach it. Again, I'm not a daily guy, but Amari Cooper to me is going to have a really, really good game. Let's get to the question board real quick. I'm going to throw this question out to you guys as I'm looking at it right now, and you guys tell me what you think with this start and sit. So we got Rhett here. Rhett asks another start or sit non-PPR question for us today. Rhett, we appreciate your loyalty to the show. Thank you so much. The guys that he's named here is start 1, Allen Robinson, Christian Kirk, AJ Dillon, or Tony Pollard in his flex. Well, I'm just going to mention real quick, Christian Kirk for me may be a fade, especially in a non-PPR game league. The weather there, like I mentioned earlier in Philadelphia, is going to be windy. It's going to be rainy. And I think in a game like that, you are really banking on catches on the short patterns, because with gusts like that, I don't think they're going to be obviously airing it out downfield too much. But that's just my opinion. I'll tell you who I think I would start after. Let's go with Steve. Who do you think here? Who do you think he should start here in a non-PPR? Allen Robinson, Christian Kirk, AJ Dillon, or Tony Pollard?
It's a good question. I think I would go with one of those running backs, especially in a non-PPR format. I know Aaron Jones is, a thorn in the side for AJ Dillon from a fantasy perspective, but they're going up against the Patriots, and I really like them there. All of the running backs in that game, actually. So AJ Dillon is a good option. I also really like Tony Pollard. Out of those two, I would go with one of the running backs.
Okay. Fiddle, who you got there?
Out of that group for Rhett, I'd go AJ Dillon. I think we think Packers are heavy favorites in that game. Right. They should be unaffected by the weather or some rain, which case means heavier running. If they take a big lead, AJ Dillon probably gets more of the inside the 20s work than Aaron Jones. So that's the direction that I would go.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. I think AJ Dillon is the play here because of what Fiddle did mention, is this could be a blowout, and it could be a blowout early, which means they're going to want to ride their horses. And that main power horse for the Green Bay Packers is AJ Dillon. So I would go AJ Dillon here. Now, I don't mind Tony Pollard as a play either, but because of where I think that game's going to be by the second half, I think the Green Bay Packers are going to be up big. They're actually my play in survival pool this week is the Green Bay Packers over the New England Patriots. I know they're the favorites percentage-wise as well. I was reading an article online. So I would probably go there, AJ Dillon. All right, second question from Leonard. Let's see what you got here. Start Herbert on the road in Houston coming off a rib injury and a down week, or start Mariota at home against the Cleveland Browns?
Steve, you want to take it?
Oh, man, yeah. It's so hard to compare Mariota to Herbert there. The rushing ability, that Mariota has and gives him some interest in that game, but I'm going to go with Herbert. I just can't stomach starting Mariota. Herbert's got a nice matchup against the Texans, good bounce back spot. I wouldn't keep him on your bench this week. I
agree. It's a Herbert no-brainer. The only thing more obvious than Herbert's to start is that guy Di Giovanni is an Italian asking that question.
I like it. I was actually going to mention the same thing. Hey, how are you? How you doing? But I would have to say the same thing. I would probably go Herbert, even though the matchup does favor Mariota a little bit better in terms of defenses against quarterbacks. So I get why you're asking that question with the injury to Herbert, but I don't think the Chargers are going to march out Herbert if he was honestly that hurt. Now we get it. He's banged up. He's hurt. It's going to affect. Doesn't have Keenan Allen again. I think they're going to. We said last week we thought Eckler was going to be more involved, and he just simply wasn't. I think this week Chargers get back to who they are, run the football, throw the football deep to Mike Williams. Mike Williams, remember, I've said this from day one. He's such a boom and bust guy, Mike Williams. And guess what he did last week? He busted. So what is he going to do this week? He'll probably boom. So I'm on Herbert here. I don't like Mariota in general. I'm hoping he has a good week because I have a lot of stock in Pitts, as you guys that follow me and know the show know. So I'm hoping he has a good week in Cleveland, but I would go Herbert there without even thinking about it. Fiddle, this is a direct question for you, buddy. How does rain affect Hertz as a daily fantasy starter this week?
So I gave out Hertz as in my core with AJ Brown. However, that was recorded prior to understanding there was going to be heavy rain and 30-mile-per-hour winds thanks to Hurricane Ian in Philadelphia. So, Ron, you cannot play Jalen Hurts in terms of DFS today. You cannot spend up for a guy who's going to be throwing in heavy wind. We know wind and temperature are the two weather factors that impact NFL games the most. People often think it's snow and rain. That's not the case. It's actually wind and temperature. So heavy wind in this game means avoid a quarterback. I like pivoting over to Josh Allen because we are hearing 30-mile-per-hour winds in Philadelphia, but 13-mile-per-hour winds in the Buffalo-Baltimore game. That won't impact it as much. We also know Josh Allen plays with a ton of quick slants, quick hitters, option passes. So I like switching over and pivoting to a stack of Diggs and Josh Allen. And then furthermore, I was also on Saquon earlier, but because of the rain in that game and because of how run heavy I think it's going to be, I'm switching over and taking Khalil Herbert because I think now that the PPR upside of Saquon is going to be less extreme, I think that clock is going to be ticking. I want one of the running backs in that game, but I'd rather take the cheaper one. So for directly to answer your question, Ron, avoid Hertz, go with a guy like Josh Allen. And if you are paying up and paying a guy like Saquon, also consider fading that option as well.
Yeah, and for season-long fantasy, you're not going to bench Hertz, right? This is a total different conversation. And the reason why Fiddle is saying that is because you're paying up for Hertz, right? He's an expensive buy in daily fantasy sports. He's going to get his rushing yards. It's pretty obvious. And I think he's going to do well in the passing game. I do, but I don't think he's going to have what you're going to need to pay for him in daily fantasy sports. I think you need to fade Devonte Smith here as well. I think he's more hurt by the weather than AJ Brown is. So if you're going to take one of those wide receivers, I think it's going to be A.J. Brown. I think Goddard has a pretty good game here this week as well. Devonte Smith could go off. I mean, he's been showing that he's been very good, but he's that deep threat for the Philadelphia Eagles with the wind and the rain. I think that's going to be a little bit of a miss. Go ahead.
Let me ask you guys a question. If you have a guy like Goddard and he's your tight end, and you probably don't have the best second backup tight end if you have a guy like Goddard because, you know, he's tight end one. He's right in the middle of the pack. You spent up to get him. What pivot would you be going in a season-long fantasy? Would you be comfortable playing into the Goddard, or would you look to waivers to pick up like a Tunyon or a Evan Ingram or an Alberto? Like, would you fade Goddard for someone less known?
See, that's a good question. And if you said a guy like Tunyon, I may consider Tunyon. I think Tunyon is going to continue to get better and better this year. Aaron Rodgers seems to be finding him in a little bit more and more each week. But Ingram, no. Ingram, no. Being a Giants fan myself, his hands are stone. I get it. He had a couple of good weeks. Go ahead.
Ingram's also in that game, so that was a bad example because he's simply going to be on the other side of the field in a bad weather spot.
Right. So I think I stick with my draft pick, right? You drafted Goddard, like you said, early as your tight end one. Let's just hope that the rain isn't as bad as they're saying it's going to be, and the wind is still a factor. However, Goddard will still do well in the wind other than the rain. So let's just pray that there's not much rain. Steve, what do you think about that one?
The fortunate thing about that dilemma is that the tight end landscape is so hard in season-long fantasy. So your opponent is probably, unless he has a guy like Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, you're probably okay there. I would stick with Goddard over those waiver wire guys that you mentioned, even though there's rain forecasted.
Can I make a bold prediction?
It's here.
If I have Darren Waller in my season-long leagues, I'm looking to trade him immediately. I think the Raiders absolutely stink. I think Waller, when I watched last game, and I know this might be an overreaction, but this man dropped 3 touchdowns last game. And by like the second, third drop, he was clearly the ball bouncing off his hands and then picking up his head and looking for the hit that was coming before getting smacked. And then like the hit would come, and it was like, I was literally watching and being like, "Ow, that hurt me to watch." But I'm like, Waller might have a case of the yips for me. Like, I know it might be crazy to call that, but his hands this season have turned into stone. He used to catch everything. He used to have a dominant catch radius. Now you search Darren Waller's name on Twitter, and every Raiders fan knows him as the drop king. So while he still has a big name, while it's still early in the season, I would look to get off of Waller. I'd rather get a guy like Gerald Everett for an entire season and see if that can get me a, buy low, late running back. If I could get myself an Antonio Gibson and Everett for Waller, I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I noticed that too with Waller. I think it's a case of the yes. I think his confidence is just shot right now.
Yeah.
You can just tell too, like you're absolutely right. Before he's catching the ball, he's looking up, seeing if any defenders are around him. The ball's hitting him off his face mask a few times. I think he's just mentally lost it right now. You could tell he's moping around the field as well. His confidence is just shot. So if I could trade him, I would. However, I may wait and see if he has like a really good week so I can get best value for him, because you did draft him super duper high if you did have him as your tight end 1. I don't mind getting those 2 guys that you mentioned in Gibson and Everett, but I don't know anybody that is willing to trade Waller for Everett and Gibson right now. But if you could get that, I 100% think you do. If not, hold, wait for a big week and then trade him.
Totally agree. You got to wait until you get that big week, and then people are tantalizing over the talent there. So I like the deal you mentioned, but I would wait until Waller has a big week. I'm not sure if it's going to happen this week. And as a Raiders fan, it's been very difficult to watch.
Yeah, it's not happening this week. They're playing the Broncos. Broncos are plus 2.5 in that game. It's an afternoon game. I'm hoping that line ticks up to a +3 so I could jump on the number at +3. I haven't bet it yet, but I really do like the Broncos. Potential teaser leg with a 6-point teaser up to the 8.5 if I could find another game to pair it with. That is something that I'm watching over the next few hours, hoping to either get a better number or another bet to pair with it that I like. But my eyes are really locking in on Broncos plus 2.5 for the 4 o'clock games.
All Russell Wilson needed was his old rival in the 49ers to get him back on track. Towards the end of that game, he looked like his old self a little bit, and maybe he'll carry that into today's game and beat the other old Bay Area team.
Yeah, and I think, again, right, Russell Wilson, as they say, cooks when his running game is cooking, right? Russell Wilson is not the quarterback that you're going to drop back 50 times a game and expect him to set off the world. However, this week, like you guys mentioned, is the perfect matchup in terms of getting him going. Why? Vegas stinks against the run. They've given up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs this season. So I love both running backs in that game. Yes, I even like Gordon. Why? He's getting 10 plus carries per game. He's going to have the opportunities to do something this week. So if you have him, he's definitely in your flex conversation. Javonte Williams, I think, has a very good game this week. They need him to really get going. And if this head coach doesn't get his you-know-what out of his you-know-what, this Denver team is going to be in trouble all year long. And the way they get out of it is by running the football. Solidify the run to get Russell Wilson going. Going back to the questions, we have another question here from my lovely, wonderful, beautiful sister. She asks, Moore over Godwin. I'm guessing that's Elijah Moore over Chris Godwin. Krista, my recommendation is to you is we don't know if Godwin's playing this week. It's a night game, so you're going to have to go with Elijah Moore there. I haven't seen any news. Have you guys seen news on Godwin yet?
What if it's DJ Moore?
If it's DJ Moore, Then we have another conversation of trying to pick somebody up like Reynolds off the waiver wire because DJ Moore right now is a ghost of himself. I think you saw that interview this week when he was asked the question. The coach was saying, or I'm sorry, Baker was saying that his wide receivers are not getting open. I think that's an absolute disaster of a comment by any quarterback, and probably one of the worst ones I've heard all season. DJ Moore is a very good wide receiver, and I hope the New York Giants trade for DJ Moore. But I don't think him and Baker have a connection. So if that is DJ Moore, Krista, I would actually wait, maybe pick up a Russell Gage if somebody dropped him after last week to fill in for Godwin if Godwin doesn't play. What do you think, Steve?
You know, it's so hard to talk about benching DJ Moore, but he just hasn't shown it to us this year so far with Baker under center. I like your idea of pivoting there to another option on the waiver wire. I do think it's possible that he gets back on track this week, and I don't think it's completely out of bounds to start DJ Moore again. I know that's crazy with what we've seen so far, but the guy is so talented, and they're playing a Cardinals team that I think that they can put some points on the board. So I like DJ Moore a little bit in that spot, depending on who's on the waiver wire. I would rather play DJ Moore over a Russell Gage.
I think this could be definitely a week where it's squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we see DJ Moore have 5 targets in the first quarter in the first 2 drives. It's just quick slants, quick hitters, curl routes, those types of things. In which case, for a PPR sense, I think this is your potential, last week to die on the DJ Moore hill. If he doesn't do it this week, he's dead to me.
Plant your flag. Your flag.
I'd give DJ one more week. We're also seeing a ton of sharp action come in on the Panthers. The Panthers opened that game as a 1.5 dog, and now they're going into it as a point favorite for the game. I see Joe's question, Kareem Hunt or Rashad Penny today. How are you guys feeling? I'm personally paying Penny in my season-long leagues. I liked Penny's price tag in a DFS sense. Comparing Kareem Hunt to him, what are you thinking?
Yeah, see, this is a tough one for me, and the reason why I think it's tough is I think Hunt gets involved a little bit in the passing game here this week. Like I mentioned before, Falcons are horrendous against the pass, both to running backs and to wide receivers. But Rashad Penny it should get the bulk of the carries, at least for this last week. I do think Walker's going to get more and more involved as we're moving forward. If I had a gun to my head, I would probably have to start Penny here. Just because I think his opportunities are going to be more than Kareem Hunt's opportunities this week.
For the floor, I'd go Penny. For the upside, I'd go Hunt.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's exactly. You're absolutely right. Yep.
I also realized I just missed over Sulin's question, so I want to make sure we get to that as well. A couple okay weeks for Devin Duvernay in the flex. Any longer-term flex potential there? Definitely this week. If they're playing against the Bills and that game's going to be an absolute shootout, this would be another week where you could potentially go back to the well with Duvernay. However, it is a dart throw. You have guys like Bateman there. You have, some other Andrews, is always going to be involved. Dobbins is getting healthier. There is wind and rain, so watch out for that. But if we are expecting this game's point total to stay high, meanwhile, I should check that out right now. Yeah, the point total is still at 50.5, so it's still expected to be a shootout in one of the higher scoring games this weekend. So I would say Duvernay's got another week where he lives in the flex.
Steve, go ahead.
It depends on what other options you have there, I would say. I would be a little bit uncomfortable if Duvernay was in my flex, although I understand the appeal there. He's played really well through 3 weeks. His fantasy points have been there, so you could write it again. You're right. It's a high points total. I would prefer to have another option, but if depending on what your other options are, it's not out of line to put him there.
Yeah, and if you're playing Duvernay, right, you're expecting a touchdown, right? Because that's really where he's getting his points, is a couple of grabs, a couple of deep balls, and the touchdowns. With the rain and the wind, okay, again, they're passing. Now, the over-under and total like that is going to be affected. However, I still think these teams are going to put up points, right? They're both explosive I should say Baltimore is very explosive in the run game. So they're still going to put up the points. They're still going to have those play actions. They're still going to try to push it down the field. But just like Steve said, if you can, Swellen, and you're still listening here, why don't you go ahead and let us know who else you have on your bench in terms of your flex spot? Because I'm kind of curious because, like Steve, I'm not very comfortable with putting Duvernay in my flex spot as of right now because of the weather situation. But I'm okay with holding him, right? If you want to hold on to him, absolutely hold on to him. He's actually free agent in some of my leagues. So if you want to hold on to him, I do suggest that. But let's see who else you have in that flex spot. Another question from Agumba. He asks, half-point PPR, deep league, Juju Smith or Gabe Davis at wide receiver 2?
Go ahead, Steve.
I think I would go Gabe Davis there over Juju. Half-point PPR. I know that he's been struggling a little bit, but I think he gets back on track in this game. So I'd stick Gabe Davis there.
I agree. I'd go Gabe Dave. I love how we've nicknamed Gabe Davis's last name into like he's not
Gabe
Davis,
Dave.
Gabe Dave now. That would be the direction I go. Again, the point total in that Baltimore versus Bills game versus the under being really bet down. The Chiefs Bucks opened at 49. It's now down to 45.5. That's one of the biggest line movements we've seen, 3.5 points towards the under. I would avoid playing a guy like Juju. I think that is a slow-moving game for Brady versus Mahomes and doesn't fit the bill of the two superstar quarterbacks that you would think it would.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think this game is not going to be what you think it's going to be with the shootout, the old gunslinger versus the new gunslinger, right? The showdown in the Wild West. It's not like that. It's not going to be like that this week. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I was never high on Juju coming into this season. I think Gabe Davis, if you saw what he says, I'm playing. I think he's trying to prove to everybody that he is the guy in which we thought he was. He had a down week last week. With the weather, obviously, we know we've been talking about this game's weather for a while, but Buffalo really isn't the best running team, so they're going to be passing the ball. I think Gabe Davis is going to catch a lot of balls this week in terms of PPR points. Since it's a half, I think it's a half point. You said, yep, half point. I would go Gabe Davis here over Juju Smith. And Sue Ellen did mention, she says she's got Antonio Gibson. She just put him in the flex. She was more wondering if she should keep him long-term. And my answer to that is yes, keep him long-term. I would not drop him just yet because think about it. If something happens to Bateman, let's just say, or something like that, he becomes a solidified wide receiver 1, obviously after Andrews. But I still like his upside from week to week. You got a lot of bye weeks, guys. You got to remember, bye weeks are coming in season-long fantasy. Bye weeks are coming. You need to have a steady enough bench, comfortable enough to just put a guy right into one of those empty spots that you have to buys. And a Duvernay, he's a type of guy that I wouldn't mind putting in on a week, basis in terms of bye weeks. So yes, I think you should definitely keep Devin Duvernay moving forward.
Or try to trade him. If he has another touchdown this week and has a good performance, maybe it's a good time next week to try and offer him to a team that is in need of a wide receiver.
All right, so I have a question for you guys. Okay, this is a very popular rookie draft pick, a guy that's starting to pick up some steam, and it's Damien Pierce. Damien Pierce is going this week against the Los Angeles Chargers. Okay, I think Damien Pierce has a ceiling that we know and we can see. Okay, I don't think Damien Pierce is the type of guy that's going to go off for 40, 35, 30 points in a full-point PPR. I think he's a steady guy with a steady floor. Now, this week, it's a little tricky in terms of how to navigate this. Okay, so they're going to get to the Chargers like I mentioned before. They've given up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs, and they don't have Joey Bosa. Okay, so my question to you guys, is Damien Pierce a RB2 start, or is he more of a flex guy this week going against the LA Chargers?
I think he's a flex. I think this game script is going to be very bad for the Texans. I think Chargers take a lead in this one, and we see a lot of Rex Burkhead. We know when the Texans have been down in games, we see about 70% of Burkhead snaps, which just crushes Pierce. So I think this is more of a basement game than a ceiling game for Pierce.
I think I'm gonna disagree with you on that one. I'll put him as an RB2 for me. I think that he has the potential to find the end zone. I think he's one of the Texans' better offensive skill position options. I think they'll find ways to get him involved, and I like the spot here against the Chargers.
All right, I want to ask you, Fiddle, a question here. You had mentioned that Carolina game for betting purposes, right? How the spread has been moving in favor of Carolina. Why is the spread moving in favor of Carolina? I get it. Arizona has not been good, but in my opinion, Carolina has just been worse. So what's going on in terms of the betting world that is making this shift, such a drastic shift in spread?
So we do have Carolina at home.
Okay.
We do know that the Sharps have been fading the Arizona Cardinals all offseason. That win total opened at 9.5. It was bet down to 8.5. They've been getting faded in literally every game that they've played this year. So it's either just another tick in that direction of just we hate the Arizona Cardinals and the public still overvalues a guy like Kyler too much. So we're just going to keep betting against it. There's also the added factor of the past 3 seasons, or there's been 3 games already where Matt Rule has played against Cliff Kingsbury, and Rule is 3-0 and has scored over 30 points in every game and has an average margin of victory of like 17. So in that matchup historically, we know that Rule dominates Kingsbury, which is definitely an angle to play into. It's exactly the angle that I'm playing into for the 49ers versus Rams, where I'm playing the Shanahan dominates McVay. Sometimes coaching systems and philosophies kind of clash. And even though one team's style or the players aren't as talented, the style actually presents issues for the other team. So I think the style that Carolina plays, which is heavy zone D with really good people who can drop back into the secondary, can confuse Kyler. And then on offense, I mean, the Arizona defense is just shambles up front. Right. So we'll see if CMC, if Foreman can run all over them. But the Cardinals haven't been able to stop anything. Yeah. And I think they present matchup problems from the other direction too.
I'm loving what I'm hearing for DJ Moore. I'm loving I really hope it happens for him this week.
Yeah. And I'm a DJ Moore fan too. I agree. I mean, I'm a fan of him as a player. I just don't like his situation.
The only saving grace for the Arizona Cardinals defense is their number 1 corner, which will be matched up against DJ this week. So everywhere else is a complete disaster. We'll see if they're sliding DJ around the field and getting him some options. I would say this has to be a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of game for DJ.
Well, what it sounds like, Fiddle, it's kind of a toss-up, no? Is that what you're kind of saying this game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 1-point spread, and it's gone both ways. Like, I don't have any bet on it.
Right.
If someone was, like, telling me, LaFids, you need to have a bet on this game, the right bet is to side with the betting experts and take Carolina. So I always like to know where the experts are, where the people who are maxing out sports books and putting $100,000 on this game. Where are you guys putting your money? Because that has such a bigger market impact than all the other Joe Schmoes betting $10, $15, $50, those things. I want to know where the big money bucks are, where the big expert gamblers are. And for this game, they're certainly on Carolina.
Right. And another thing to keep an eye out on that game is the health of Christian McCaffrey, right? He says he's playing, but he hasn't practiced all week. He had a limited practice yesterday, which was just helmets and shoulder pads, if not just helmets. It's his I think it's his thigh or something that he's got banged up. Do I think what we're going to see this week is a scale back for Christian McCaffrey? That's definitely possible. And I think if that is possible, we need to see who's getting those carries. Is it Hubbard or is it Foreman? Now, I think it's going to be Foreman. I have him as my handcuff on my bench, but you just don't know when it comes to Matt Rule. I'm not a believer in Matt Rule at all. The reason why this guy's a head coach to begin with is he turned around, I think it was Temple, who was on a horrendous college football team before he got there. He had a couple of good recruits. He turned them around. I just don't think he's a good NFL football coach. But we'll see where they go here at the running back too. So keep your eye on that and see who gets some carries here behind Christian McCaffrey. Now, it could be Foreman and it could be Hubbard, meaning that Foreman will get more of the early down work if Christian McCaffrey misses it and Hubbard gets the third down role. But we'll see this week because I think they're going to scale him back a little bit. I hope not. I have Christian McCaffrey. I really hope they don't scale him back. Let's see what other questions I have in terms of starts and sits in fantasy. Josh Reynolds, right? Let's go after this one for a second, okay?
Yep.
Josh Reynolds, Detroit Lions. The Sun God is not playing. DJ Chark is not playing. Swift is not playing. This Detroit Lions offense is hurt, and they're hurt bad. In steps Reynolds as wide receiver number 1, supposedly, for the Detroit Lions. He had a great game last week. Do you guys think he is a start this week in your flex spot. PPR, full point PPR.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I would say flex spot is fine. Obviously, all of these questions depends on who the options
So
are.
I'll give you another name. How about if I have, because this is the situation that I'm having right now. If I have somebody like Bateman in a bad weather game, okay, would you in your flex spot go Reynolds over Bateman in a bad weather game, or would in the full point PPR?
No, I'd go Bateman there. I could see that Lions game end with one of the other two wide receivers who ends up having the bigger game. I don't think it's a sure thing that Josh Reynolds, although he will act as a wide receiver one, he might not finish as a wide receiver one. I want Lamar Jackson's top wide receiver, although Andrews is the top pass catcher. I'd go Bateman.
I will say this. Josh Reynolds is in my DFS lineup this week, 100%.
Daily guy for sure.
However, it was a pivot off of Richie James because I think at this point with the weather, we have to question if Richie James is playable at all. With even though he will be the number 1 or 2 option with Galladay there and Sills, we have to question because of the weather. We know the Lions play in a dome. Another guy I really like for DFS, if you're going with the Reynolds angle, is Khalif Raymond. He's going to be the second wide receiver for the Lions. He's going to be out there running routes every single time Reynolds runs a route. Raymond's running a route on the other side. So it's just a matter of where the ball goes. Raymond costs $1,500 less in DFS. It's the difference between $4,600 and $3,100. I also really like a guy like Hawkinson. If we know that all those guys are going to be out for the Lions, it might be a guy like Hawkinson who gets a lot of check down, gets a lot of safety valve work. If Goff's throwing 40 times like he's consistently been, then, all of these guys are great options. I would say Reynolds is a guy to play over a Richie James or a Khalif Raymond or a Mac Hollins type of play. But if we're subbing them in for guys like Rashad.
What about Juju? We got a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was about to get to that. Or Juju. See, Juju is an interesting one because I just don't like Juju, and I know this, and I'm so far off this Chiefs-Bucks games as being a heavy under game, and I'm into this Lions-Seahawks game as being an over game. So we've seen the total tick up playing in the Dome in Detroit. We've seen the total tick down playing in the potential weather and heat in Tampa. So in that situation,
I'm going to go Juju here. I think I'm going to go Juju here, and I'm not a Juju guy. I think it's tough. It is tough. I don't know enough about Reynolds. I don't know. He's been in the league. I feel like he's always this guy. The receivers always get hurt, and Reynolds gets thrown in, and it's talked up to be wide receiver 1. He could go absolutely off, but I think his floor is really, really low.
I'm going Reynolds. Steve, you could be the tiebreak. I'm going Reynolds because I'm so anti-Juju and I'm so anti that game, and I'm betting on the Bucs. It's one of my favorite bets. I'm betting on the under. So yeah, I'm off that. I'm going Reynolds. Steve, tiebreak.
Yeah, we found the line right here. I mean, this is the line.
Flip a coin.
That's it.
Yeah, I know. I think you know what I would say. I would say, Matt, you go with who you think is the better football player. If you think that Juju is a better football player than Josh Reynolds, go with Juju in that game. If you think that you like Reynolds' talent, I think he got into the end zone last week. I think he could find a way to have a big game. Yeah, flip a coin. I am having a really hard time with that. I guess Reynolds for the ceiling, Juju for the floor would, I guess, be the best way to put it. I think Juju has a safer floor, but I think Reynolds has the higher ceiling.
Yeah, and just to go back to the Juju thing, right? Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you cannot run on Tampa Bay. So I think Kansas City's going to have to throw. They may not put up a lot of points because, like Fiddle's saying, it's going towards the under. But that doesn't mean that Buccaneers aren't going to bend and not break. And if that's the case, then you could get a nice day in a full point PPR, which is your question. You're a gambling man, my friend Matt, and I don't. Hey Matt, I know you beat me the other week too in my fan league. So I don't want to help you anymore. All right, I don't want to help you anymore. but but I'm just joking with you. But if you're a gambling man, yes, Reynolds is the way to go. If you're a gambling man, because I agree with Steve, his ceiling is higher than Juju's ceiling. So if you're a gambling man, Reynolds would be the play. All right. I don't see any more questions, and we are about up in time. The show ends at 45. We're at 44. Guys, as always, thank you for coming in and tuning in with us. Make sure you guys, if you were devastated by Hurricane Ian and you need help, make sure you reach out and get some help. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. Boys, Fids, Steve, thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the show this week. We hope to have you on again. Fids, let's win some money this week. All right. I'm riding with you on the Browns game for sure. And I'm actually probably, because I'm an idiot and I'm not Joe Schmo, I'm probably just going to take the Cardinals because I don't know. I just think they're just a better overall team than Carolina.
I'm not on that game, so I don't hate it. I know the Sharps are on Carolina, like I said, but I could easily see the Cardinals winning that one too.
All right, guys, as always,
please remember, like and subscribe.
Yes.
Like and subscribe.
Like, subscribe. Please make sure if you're on Twitter or any social media that you're sharing these, as we post these out each and every Sunday, every day, every Sunday at noon Eastern time, we will be live. Guys, appreciate it. Have a great week for everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care.
See ya.